going to say. I was going to take a sip of water before I started, but
It's rolling.
I'm here today to read the first chapter of my book, A New Day in the Delta. My name is David Beckwith, and this is about when I was a fledgling school teacher in Mississippi in the 1960s. I graduated from college in 1969 when the Vietnam War was in full thrust. And I got out of school. I tried to get a job for 2 or 3 months. When I couldn't get a job, I finally resorted to getting a job teaching school. Well, little did I know, because I was not a social activist, that I was going to work for a school district that had been declared in defiance of the federal courts and was being punished accordingly. So anyway, this New Day in the Delta is about my year at the Abraham Lincoln Attendance Center, and I'm getting ready to read to you Chapter 1. My day had started badly. Most of my days recently seemed to start badly. Each new day began with a series of skirmishes that, more often than not, escalated into battles, which, if then not checked, became mini-wars. There was seldom a clear-cut victory for these conflicts. Things had sure changed since my own school days, I mused. My teachers weren't always respected, but by God they ruled. They were the lords, we the students were the serfs. Any secret thoughts of rebellion I had always been fleeting. They had never been verbalized. After all, my mama didn't raise a fool. My attention riveted back to the present and the skirmish at hand. Ain't nothing you gotta say that I need to hear about. Nothing I ain't heard umpteen jillion times before, a petulant fish-eye grunted. Near as I can tell, nothing in this school ever helped me with anything that counts. What had begun as a well-intentioned counseling session had quickly deteriorated into a standoff. Fish-eye had drawn a line in the sand that he dared me to cross. Others in the 7th grade class had drawn this same line, for the most part silently. Less shy than others in expressing his disillusionment with a system Fish-eye felt without practical value to him, he had also enjoyed the rapt attention his bad behavior brought to him. Eugene, I wasn't supposed to call him by his nickname, despite the fact that few people in the school would recognize Fish-eye's real name. If you spent half as much time trying to get to the 8th grade as you do on extracurricular activities, I began. Dismissing me as irrelevant, he turned his head and looked out the window. As I mulled over what I could say to Fish-eye that would make any difference, my mind drifted back a few months, which already seemed like an eternity, when I had never even heard of the Abraham Lincoln Attendance Center. I relived standing outside Connor Hall on the Ole Miss campus and yelling, "Glory, hallelujah," at the thought that I had taken my last exam and that after graduation I would embark on an exciting new life. Well, this was the exciting new life, all right, but not the Leave It to Beaver one I'd left behind. The realities of Lincoln were a far cry from my WASP existence that up until then had been my only point of reference. 2 parents, a comfortable house in a middle-class, all-white neighborhood, and a segregated high school. My security had been overseen by our Cocker Spaniel, my probity assured by regular attendance in our Methodist church each Sunday. My mother was co-owner with my dad of J.G. Luskin Company, which specialized in brokering cash commodities, primarily cottonseed and soybean products. The cash commodity business at that time was a male-dominated industry, and my mother enjoyed the status of being the only female in the trade. My parents were both native Mississippians, my mother from Collins in South Mississippi, my father a Greenville native. Constance is common in the Delta. My father was born in King's Daughters Hospital, the same hospital both my brother and I were born in. Some of his teachers had been my teachers as well. His family had been old Greenville middle class. They had never been wealthy, but they'd always been respectable. He'd been raised by a prematurely widowed mom who was well-established local seamstress. Nana, as we called my grandmother, lived in the old downtown area of Greenville, 1 block from the levee. The black section of town was less than a mile away. Blacks were frequently seen walking past Nana's house on Central Avenue, more often than not to shop at the Chinese grocer half a block from her house. They certainly never entertained even a passing thought of living there. You qualified as being old Greenville if your forebears had lived there before the flood. All my life I had heard over and over the stories of the infamous 1927 flood and how Nana had allowed a black preteen, Kitty, to evacuate with the family. Kitty, when she herself had grown old, later returned to attend Nana's wake and pay her respects when Nana died at age 96. I relived the incident that had triggered the confrontation. At the back of my classroom, before class started, Fish Eye had been dealing out ice cream sandwiches that he had bought at Jones' Grocery. He was not doing this out of the goodness of his heart, but demanding the recipient's lunch money in exchange. The ice cream was beginning to melt, and it was imperative that he get rid of the stuff. His entrepreneurship also extended to dill pickles, which he stuffed in his socks. Is this how Will Cornelius Vanderbilt got started, I wondered? Is this what my 4 years college degree had gotten me? Have I become Lincoln's Dick Tracy, my specialty bringing to justice teenage culprits who illegally sold ice cream sandwiches and pickles in school? I enjoyed school, and getting an advanced degree had always appealed to me. I knew, however, that if I pursued further education, most of the financial burden was going to be mine, since my parents still had my younger brother Bill to educate. So barring getting drafted for the Vietnam War, as many of my contemporaries had been, my only option was to get a job and save my money. In an optimistic frame of mind, after all, I did have a degree now, I sent out 20 resumes with high hopes that several acceptances would show up in a short period of time. Instead, in reply to my 20 resumes, I received 20 form letters, which were brief and to the point. Thank you for thinking of us. At the present time, we have no openings, but please try us again in the future. What is the matter with these people? Don't they understand that I'm a college graduate? Hadn't my father told me since I was a small child that if I got a college degree, the doors were going to be open to me that had been closed to him because he didn't have one? It was now the 28th of July. Bill and I were home. Mom and Dad had gone to the lodge for a Masonic Eastern Star function. Bill, a budding artist, sat in the den with a sketch pad on his lap, listening to the evening news on TV. As usual, when he had a few moments, he sketched whatever crossed his line of vision. This time it happened to be our granddaddy's shotgun that Daddy had hung on the wall of the den. I sat in the dining room table, filling out resume number 21 with Mama's manual Smith Corona typewriter. I considered this resume, sent to the superintendent of schools in the town of Leland, Mississippi, inquiring about a teaching position, as my last resort. Leland was just down the road from my home of Greenville. I reasoned that since I had planned somehow to go back to the university for an advanced degree, staying in the education field would be a good idea. So, as I typed my address on the envelope, I could hear the evening news from the den. It was the Huntley Brinkley Nightly News, detailing the big events of the day. Neil Armstrong's spectacular walk on the moon had replaced Teddy Kennedy and Mary Jo Kopechne's plunge off the Chappaquiddick Bridge. I bet Senator Kennedy won't hesitate to vote for NASA's next appropriation, I called to Bill, now that Neil Armstrong's adventure has bumped his catastrophe off the news. The Kennedys had not been popular with most white adult Mississippians after Jack and Bobby spearheaded the federal government's efforts in 1962 to integrate the University of Mississippi, and a large portion delighted in Teddy's shame when the plunge off the bridge resulted in Mary Jo's tragic drowning. The next news item outlined President Nixon's Vietnamization program, in which the U.S.'s emphasis had been changed to train and equip South Vietnamese to fight their own war so that we could begin to extricate ourselves from the seemingly endless conflict. The last bit of news was short. The Nixon administration Department of Justice and HEW had filed a motion with the Supreme Court to delay integration again throughout the nation. Little did I know that this item, which I barely paid attention to, would have far more relevance to me than any of the other stories that I found far more interesting. I folded my resume, inserted it into the envelope, and supplied the stamp. Wish me luck, I called out to Bill as I headed for the mailbox which hung by the front door. That 21st job application did the trick. 3 days later, I received a letter asking me to come to the office of the Leland Superintendent of Schools for an interview. I was elated.